The absolute stupidity. We have a thing called an ocean between us.
They're in a lot more danger than we are. We have a thing called an ocean between us, right? And they don't.
That will stop Kim Jong-un's nuclear missiles from reaching the West Coast, that thing called an ocean, and will stop Vladimir Putin's missiles from reaching us as well. I mean, Donald Trump, clueless as usual.
He would cut off U.S. military aid to Ukraine if he is elected again in November. He will not give a penny in the Ukraine-Russia war, Orban told Hungarian state media after the pair met at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort last Friday.
Viktor Orban said that you told him that you want to cut funding for Ukraine as soon as you get there. Where's that effect? He said that in an interview.
Yeah.
Is he correct? Is that the plan?
Well, first of all, he's a fantastic guy, and he's taken in no illegal immigrants. He runs his country very tough, and a lot of people don't like it, but he runs it very tough, and it does very well, and there's no crime. What I told him is Europe is spending a tiny fraction of what we're spending. And the European nations, as a combination, they should be paying the same because, you know, their economy is approximately the same size. If you add them all up, their economy is very close to our economy. Plus, they're in a lot more danger than we are. We have a thing called an ocean between us, right?
So Greg Kelly on Newsmax then followed up and said, I'm not asking about geography. The question is, do you plan to immediately cut funding for Ukraine? Oh, Greg did not follow up and press Trump on that? In any case, Trump's ocean response speaks volumes. Trump is not denying that he told Viktor Orban, the authoritarian leader of Hungary, that he, Trump, plans to cut all U.S. funding to Ukraine. It is a stark contrast with the stoicism and moral clarity against Russia's Vladimir Putin from French President Emmanuel Macron. Here's the BBC's Katty Kay.
What Donald Trump said right there to what President Macron of France was saying last night on television in France to the French people. If Vladimir Putin is allowed to win in Ukraine, life will change for the French. The security of Europe cannot be guaranteed. A much more sober, realistic assessment than the one that Donald Trump is giving. And this idea that he's going to pull America straight out of that war and stop American funding for Ukraine. I hear this from Trump supporters. What are we doing there? We're just going to get caught up in another ending war, that this is going to be like Afghanistan and we'll never get out of there. America is not in Ukraine. This is the best, cheapest deal that America could ever get in terms of defense and its ability to take on its adversary.
To put a finer point on it, there are no American troops in Ukraine. The money the U.S. has been giving to Ukraine amounts to less than 5% of the annual U.S. defense budget. Also, European nations are giving more money to Ukraine than the United States is providing. So this Trump complaint about previous European military spending is a canard. If all Vladimir Putin has to do is wait until November, knowing he will then be able to take Ukraine with no U.S. opposition, does anybody really think Putin will stop there? European leaders don't think Putin will stop. Most foreign policy experts say Putin will not stop. And Putin himself has articulated what's next.
Putin has an obsession with the Baltics.
Yes.
He has an obsession with Poland.
Yes.
Oh,
my God.
He's said as much. Poland
That's next if
is
Ukraine
in his
falls.
line of sight next after Ukraine falls. And he's really said as much. And you are so right, Katty. We actually have, for less than 5% of our defense budget, we have the Ukrainians fighting Russia. They've destroyed well over a third of their military, set them back a generation. And I talk about how Russia economically is weak. If you look at ratings of the most powerful militaries in the world, we are obviously number one. There's not a close second. But Russia is second in that list, ahead of China. And it's remarkable what the Ukrainians are able to do with the support of Europe and with the support of America. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out why there are Republicans running committees in the House that sit back meekly and are willing to do, basically a Neville Chamberlain approach with Vladimir Putin.
Neville Chamberlain was the Prime Minister of Great Britain from 1937 to 1940. He is infamously remembered for his policy of trying to appease Adolf Hitler. In particular, Chamberlain signed the Munich Agreement of 1938 that ceded much of Czechoslovakia to Nazi Germany. Of course, Hitler did not stop there.
It's up to the Republicans.
Yeah.
It's up to Donald Trump to explain to us why this isn't Munich 1938 and why they aren't appeasing Vladimir Putin, because that's exactly what Lindsey Graham's doing. That's exactly what the Republicans in the House are doing. That's exactly what Mike Johnson is doing. That's exactly what Donald Trump's doing.
When MAGA Republicans have been asked about appeasing Vladimir Putin, they have sidestepped the question and attacked whoever's making that point. Here's a recent exchange with Georgia's Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Are you an appeaser for Putin?
I think that I really don't care what David Cameron has to say. I think that's rude name-calling, and I don't appreciate that type of language. And David Cameron needs to worry about his own country, and frankly, he can kiss my ass.
But do you think Putin's the good guy in all this?
Green, Trump, and other MAGA Republicans might as well be slamming the door and turning their backs on Ukraine and the rest of Europe. Because if Vladimir Putin sees the United States does not have the spine to stop Russian Ukraine, Putin will conclude that the Baltic states and Poland are there for his taking as well. All of this gets reinforced every time Donald Trump talks about pulling the United States out of the NATO alliance. Across the United States, there is a lot of discussion about democracy being on the line in the 2024 presidential campaign. But keep in mind, it's not just democracy in the United States that is at stake. Freedom and sovereignty in Europe and Asia are on the ballot as well. Donald Trump stands for U.S. isolationism and leaving the rest of the world to fend for itself. President Biden believes in the U.S. aligning with democracies and providing global stability. Stability versus chaos. Freedom versus authoritarianism. Biden versus Trump. The choice is clear, and it is stark. Thankfully, there are anti-Trump groups like the Lincoln Project who get it. Here's part of their latest ad.
American security. It's a president's and a party's highest calling, protecting us in a dangerous world, standing strong against all enemies. It's why Americans are outraged that Trump's MAGA party is deliberately leaving us open to attacks. They refuse to protect the border, shutting down the toughest bipartisan border security law in decades. Instead, they're helping the cartels, the coyotes, and the human traffickers just to score political points. Worse, they're backing Vladimir Putin's murderous regime. MAGA Republicans have cut off weapons and support to the free people of Ukraine.
If they're not going to pay, we're not going to protect.
They want Putin to win. Weak on the border, weak on national security. We know what side the MAGA GOP is on, and it's not America.
Strong ad. Now, apart from that message, let me be clear. America's foreign policy of engagement and using U.S. power has not always been just or fair or helpful to some people. But there have almost always been deep intellectual discussions in the debate and formulation of White House foreign policy. With Donald Trump, that will go out the window, and we will get stupidity, including, we have things like oceans between us. Good grief. By the way, in that same Newsmax interview, Donald Trump got delusional when talking about Hillary Clinton's handling of her emails.
She used all sorts of acid testing and everything else. They call it bleach bit, but it's essentially acid that will destroy everything, within 10 miles.
No. BleachBit is not an acid or a chemical weapon. It is data deleting computer software. Check out that video at the link below. It generated a lot of comments on YouTube. One of the most popular is from PhilCan693, who wrote, "Trump freaking out is priceless. Good for America." Yes, good for America if it hurts the Trump campaign. I look forward to reading your comments about Donald Trump's appeasement of Russia's Vladimir Putin. I'm David Shuster. Thanks for joining us.